Hey guys, you wanted the 40 before 40 and here it is. Hey guys, and welcome to the Book Path. I'm Nicole. If you're new, hi, and if you're not, thanks for sticking around and sticking with me. I know that I talked about this in my August T.B.R. video, but my birthday is just around the corner. It's on the 16th, and I will be turning 39. Please don't remind me. And I decided to follow suit with what other booktubers have done, follow the trend of the 30 before 30 or the 35 before 35, and I decided to do the 40 before 40 books. And what that means is from probably September on, just because my August TBR is already set, starting in September all the way from September 2022 through to August 16th of next year, I will have that whole year to somehow incorporate these 40 books into my TBRs. Now, a lot of these books have been on my TBR or kind of books that I've always wanted to read ever since I was little, books that my parents have read that they always talked about as being their favorites from when they were kids, books that I just said that, I'll get around to and I just never did. So a lot of these I am going to have to either try to look for them at my library or on my Libby app or try to see about how to get them because some of them aren't around in stores and some of them I like to buy them all, which is a lot of money. So we're just going to try to find ways that we can do it. Right now, I only actually have 3 physical versions of these 40 books, or 3 of the 40 books. And then I have like 2 or 3 of them on my Kindle, but the rest, I gotta go out and look and find them. So it'll be kind of an adventure and, give me an excuse to buy some books and who needs an excuse for that really, right? So anyway, let's go ahead and get started on these books. A little side note is that a lot of these books you might have heard about. I know some of them are being talked about by other booktubers or being read by them. A lot of them have been made into movies or television shows, many adaptations. So some of them will be featuring in my other series that I want to start doing with books that do have adaptations on which one's better, the book or the adaptation. But for those books that I feel like they're really out there and most people know what they're about, I'm pretty much going to give the title of the book and the author of it and then kind of move on from that because otherwise, 40 books is a lot to go through. So I'm going to try to concentrate giving more details on the books that I feel aren't really talked about or maybe are from longer back and they're not really considered classics, but not a lot of people know about them, and I'll give more in depth on those. I do have to have notes once again because it's 40 books. I can't remember all of those and I don't have the stack in front of me. So we're gonna go with notes and so let's go ahead and get started. So talking about the books that a lot of booktubers are talking about right now, these books have been on my list since I was a teenager, and those are none other than the works of Jane Austen. I have seen a lot of the adaptations and films based on Jane Austen's works. I've seen a lot of the kind of spin-off versions, the more modern day kind of mixes of them, but I have never read any of the books, and I feel like I can't call myself a true Jane Austen fan until I have read the books. So I will be concentrating on her more known books. So I won't be reading Sanditon or any of the other ones. I'm going to focus on the 6 main ones that everybody kind of knows. Eventually I will get to the other books. I think there's Sanditon. I think the other one might be like Lady Susan or something. But I want to read the kind of canon books for her. And so obviously we're going to be reading Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Persuasion, which right now Persuasion, out of any of the film adaptations, Persuasion is my best. Not the Netflix one, the new Netflix one. I have not seen that one. I've heard horrible things about it, and when I watched the trailer, it didn't look that interesting. However, when I do try to compare the adaptations to the book, I will be watching it, so stay tuned for thoughts on that. But Persuasion will be thrown into the mix, as well as Mansfield Park. So those are going to be the works that I concentrate on for Jane Austen. I would really like to get a physical copy of those books, just because I feel like it's a book that I'm going to, tab up and want to make sure I have notes on it, comparing it to the movies, and just the fact that these are considered like some of the greatest books of all time. So we'll be doing that. The next book that I want to read is one that my mother, when I asked her, it was one of the books when she was younger that she loved. I asked her this probably when I was a teenager, and she said the book was called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, and it's by Hannah Green and Joan Greenberg. And I didn't really know what it was about. She said it was about a girl that had troubles, and it was the relationship between her and her therapist or psychiatrist. So I did look it up, and basically the blurb said, enveloped in the dark inner kingdom of her schizophrenia, 16-year-old Deborah is haunted by private tormentors that isolate her from the outside world. With the reluctant and fearful consent of her parents, she enters a mental hospital where she will spend the next 3 years battling to regain her sanity with the help of a gifted psychiatrist. As Deborah struggles toward the possibility of the normal life she and her family hope for, the reader is inexorably drawn into her private suffering and deep determination to confront her demons. So I didn't realize until I had looked that up that this was dealing with schizophrenia, and that this is dealing with it when like my mom was a teenager. So this would have been, and I don't even know if this book came out around then or if it already existed when she was a teenager, because she was a teenager in like the 60s and early 70s. So I know that the mental institutions at the time, the therapists, the whole concept of psychology was drastically different in the 60s and 70s to what it is now. So being able to take a look at that, I might be in for a box of tissues on this one. I don't think this is going to be a happy feelings read. I think it's going to be something that is going to be very touching though. And I think it's going to be something that is, despite the fact that it's dealing with something that can be considered so dark that she has to go through all of this, finding a way of hope and maybe knowing that, doctors that, are there to help her, that's coming a long way now, and that more people that have things like schizophrenia are getting better assistance now than maybe what she went through, because I also know that I've heard that this is supposed to be based on a true story. So I am very interested to read this. Like I said, I've had my eye on this book since I think I was like 15 or 16. So I'll be really happy to finally get it, done with, and my thoughts on it. So the other book that I have, it's one of the first ones that I actually do own, and that is Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Suzanne. I love the cover of this because this is the movie cover. There is a film adaptation of this as well. And those are the, So Valley of the Dolls. The dolls, I believe, are basically the pills that you see here. So there is a lot of triggers on this book. This book deals a lot with drugs, sex, attempted rape. It was at the time a highly talked about novel when it was released, and I believe it was released in the 60s. And this was like, you want to talk about banned books, this was just, center of conflict for a lot of people not wanting to read it, people wanting and getting really aggressive and angry towards the author. I mean, it was a big deal at the time it came up. And basically, the back says dolls, red or black, capsules or tablets, washed down with vodka or swallowed straight. For Anne, Neely, and Jennifer, it doesn't matter as long as the pill bottle is within easy reach. These three women become best friends when they were young and struggling in New York City, and then climb to the top of the entertainment industry only to find out that there's no place left to go but down. So I do know that these are girls that are starting to try to make it into the workforce when women were thought to be better, caretakers at home. They want to, I think one of them wants to be a secretary. She's not in the entertainment industry, but one of them wants to be an actress, and I can't remember what the other one does. But it's all about them struggling as women, struggling to find more meaningful relationships when there are a lot of men that want to take advantage of them. It is about the parties. It's about, you know, obviously the drugs and the alcohol and just a lot of issues. So I will be really interested to read this. I tried reading it years ago and put it down, not because it was bad. Other stuff got in the way and I just couldn't finish it. I've only seen clips of the movie, but I am really excited to read this. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. So I will be reading Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Suzanne at some point this year. Next, I know this has also made the rounds, and people have been wanting to read it, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I am a huge fan of his books. I believe, watch now, I'm gonna get it wrong, but I believe he's behind The Three Musketeers, and I really do love that story. I kind of read the kids version when I was little, and eventually I might try to repick up the actual version and read that along with like The Man in the Iron Mask, and maybe do comparisons to the movies on that, because I am a Three Musketeers junkie on the movies. I love the old Chris O'Donnell, Oliver Platt, Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland version. I adore that version. So you know, eventually I'll do that. But I wanted to do The Count of Monte Cristo because I haven't read that one yet. I did love the film way back in the day. I had a huge crush on Henry Cavill, who later is now in The Witcher and Superman. Count of Monte Cristo, I think, was one of his more earlier roles, and you couldn't like find pictures of him anywhere from it because he just had like these little cameos, and he is Mercedes' son in that. So that's a fun little movie tidbit for you. But I want to read it because I love the story. I want to see if the book gives more in depth to the planning that Edmond Dantes does to seek his revenge, if there's a little bit more into it. I know it is a chunky one, so finding time to read is going to be interesting, but like I said, it's one that I want to read. My husband's a huge fan of The Count of Monte Cristo too, so maybe me reading it will prompt him to read it, or maybe it can be something we do, you know, cute couple night or something. We just sit down, chill, drink something, and read Count of Monte Cristo together. It'd be kind of cool. So I do want to read that one. Another book by Alexandre Dumas that I want to read. I read the first part of it many years ago. Don't remember a lot of it, but I still love it. And that is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I am a huge fan of Quasimodo, the character. I love the Disney version. I also love, there's an older version where Anthony Hopkins plays Quasimodo, and I am a huge Anthony Hopkins fan. I love that man. And I just love the story of Quasimodo. I always wanted him to be with Esmeralda. I know that doesn't work out. That's a spoiler, but heck, if you watch the Disney movie, you already know that. So it's been many years since I read it. I think I read it when I was like 13 or 14, and I only read the first part. And I know there's a second part, and they did make a Disney version on the second part, and they bring in Quasimodo has a new love interest. So I want to make sure that that is something that really does happen, and that's not just something that, you know, Disney wanted to do to give Quasimodo his happy ending, even though if it is, I applaud that because he deserves a happy ending. I love Quasimodo. So I do want to read The Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's going to be another thick, chunky tome, so might have to space it between some of the others. The next book is another one that I actually have, and I have also had this when I was a teenager, never got to it, gave it away, let people borrow it, never got it back, so I had to go and get a new copy, and that is The Phantom of the Opera. Yes, I am talking the musical. However, before it was a musical, it was a book written by Gaston Leroux. And what I do know is that the book is written from the perspective of the detective who is investigating the disappearance of Christine and Raoul. So it kind of leads you through that, and from a very different standpoint. And so I'm interested to see, because I've seen in some movies they give a little bit of backstory to the Phantom, not just what happens in the Paris Opera House with Christine and what you see in the musical. So I want to see it through that, see what the musical is based on. I love the musical. It's one of my favorite musicals of all time. I did go and see it on Broadway, and it was amazing, and I love the Phantom. I am Team Phantom over Team Raoul as far as the musical goes, even though I know he's not the greatest of people, but I do want to read the book. It's not that long, so, you know, I should be able to get through this. I'm hoping maybe I'll get through this, you know, September or October for, you know, Halloween, because it is a little bit, to me, I think the Phantom, you know, Phantom, spooky, you know, that's the way my mind goes. But it is one that I do want to read, so I will be reading this at some point. Next is going to be the third and final physical book that I currently own. Hopefully I will be able to get more that's on the list. This one is another chunky tome. This I have read at least like 200 pages of it. Once again, put it down, not because it was bad. Time got away from me. This also has a TV series that I love, and that is The Mist of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley, and I love the cover. I love it. I want to try to find this in a hardcover because it is, I know I'm going to like it. I've read 200 pages, loved it. And basically what this story is this is the story of King Arthur, only it's told by the women in the myths and the legends of King Arthur. So you're getting it told from the Lady of the Lake, the Lady Igraine. You're getting it told from Arthur's mother's perspective, his aunt's perspective. You're getting it from Morgan Le Fay's perspective, Guinevere's perspective. All the women are sharing their parts on it, and it does feel very, it's not so much whimsical and like myth or legendy feeling. It goes more for almost like historical, because they do talk about the pagan traditions that were involved at the time, and kind of how meaningful that is into the development of Camelot. So something very different. Like I said, read the first like 200 pages, adored it. It just, time got away from me, and she's a chunky book. She's like, what is it, 900 pages or something. So it's going to be really interesting. I want to see, I've seen the show, loved the show. So I want to see how close or different the show is going to be to the book, and rewatch the show, and then finally get this one done, because I just know I'm going to love it. I know I'm going to love it. And the cover's so pretty. I really hope they have this in hardcover. So next on the list is a book that I want to try to put on my September TBR somehow, or I might just say, you know what, I'm going to read it in September. And that is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Mostly I want to read it before October, because October 5th, they're going to be showing a new TV series based on the book series out on AMC. And I can't remember the actor's name, but I know it was the man who played Grey Worm in the Game of Thrones series. So I was really excited to see that he is going to be playing the lead role of Louis in Interview with the Vampire. So I definitely want to try to see if I can read the book before the show comes out, so I can compare the two together. But Anne Rice and her vampire series, that is like quintessential. If you like vampires, you have to read Anne Rice's vampire series at some point in time. This was a series that when I was younger, I was just starting to really like vampires, Dracula, and I wanted to read it. And I asked my mom and dad, because they were reading it, and both my parents were like, no, this is a little too advanced for you. You gotta wait till you get older. And I was like, okay, fine. And everybody, all I would hear is everybody loved the book. Oh my God, it was great. Oh my God, it was great. And I wanted to read it, and everybody was like, no, you're too little. You're too little. So I never got around to reading it. I did watch the old, God, I feel bad saying it's old. It's not that old, but I guess it is for some people. But the Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt version of that came out. I did see that, and I finally kind of understood the grim, darker part of it, that, yeah, maybe at the time I was a little too young for that. but not now. And I have read some Anne Rice books before, and I do enjoy them. So I want to read her most, I guess maybe I feel safe in calling it her most successful series that she's ever written, because I know she has like a werewolf series, she has a more risque series, but the vampire series is pretty much what's associated with her name, and I want to read them. So I will be starting off with Interview with the Vampire, which is the first book in this series. Hopefully I'll be able to continue on, but for Interview with the Vampire, I want to get that done before the show comes out. Next is going to be one that I don't know if it's going to stay on the list. I flip-flop between wanting to read it or not, and that is 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this book because when this first came out, I was actually working at a bookstore, and the amount of people that would come in to ask for this book was overwhelming and annoying. It was annoying. We literally had a stand with the books as soon as you entered the store, but they would still come to try to find you to be like, oh, where's this book? And you'd have to take them back. So it got to be really annoying, and everybody was, hyping it up, and I just didn't really want to read it because everybody else was reading it, and I just didn't have an interest in it. Then the movies came out and it got hyped up again, and I was just like, I don't want to read it because I feel like it's setting me up to be disappointed in it. So then I felt like, okay, maybe it's time to start reading it. And then somebody let it slip that apparently 50 Shades of Grey is a loose fan. It started out as a fan fiction of Twilight. So I looked that up. That's a true statement apparently. And a lot of interest tanked kind of after that, because I did read at least the first 3 books of Twilight when they first came out, and they weren't bad, but I wasn't really a fan, and I have never seen more than the first movie, and I literally had to get dragged to that movie. I did not like it. I know there are people who love it. It is the greatest thing to them, and you know what? Great for you. I am happy for you. I did not like them. But knowing that this is based on it is definitely kind of a turnoff, but at the same time, there's a lot of acclaim for these books, and I haven't watched the movies for the 50 Shades of Grey yet. So I feel it's kind of like due diligence at this point that I kind of have to, especially when I'm starting to read more fantasy romance or more romance or steamy romance on my channel. I feel like 50 Shades of Grey is something that it's like canon. You kind of have to read it now. So probably will. We'll see if I continue with it or not. That'll be an adventure. The next book that I want to read is, once again, it's another book from when my mom was a teenager. Don't really know what it is, but the book is Lisa and David, and it's by Dr. Theodore Isaac Rubin. And this was made into a movie. And basically, I just thought it was something similar to like a love story once again. And I thought it was cute because I was like, oh, it's mom and dad's name. And yeah, no, this is another one that's probably going to be hard hitting because Theodore Isaac Rubin is a renowned psychiatrist. And he reveals the complex struggles of children with severe mental illness. Lisa and David are 2 troubled teens whose growing friendship breaks communication barriers. So David is extremely intelligent with extraordinary abilities in math, physics, and chess. He is passionately interested in clocks. He cannot bear to be touched, is petrified of germs and human contact, and he suffers overwhelming panic attacks and obsessive compulsive behavior. Lisa is a schizophrenic who must constantly speak in sing-song rhymes to avoid losing herself to Muriel, her moody, brooding, scowling, silent other self. So I don't know. I mean, some of these, some of the behaviors that they're talking about with David seem very familiar to the autism spectrum. So I don't know if it's going to go into that or because this book, once again, is like the 60s and 70s. And I know that autism was not as highly diagnosed and the ability to diagnose it wasn't done as well as it is now. And then, of course, Lisa, you have schizophrenia again, like I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. But this one, she's talking about Muriel, and I'm not sure if schizophrenia, if they have different personalities, if that's something, or if that's something more with like an identity disorder. So once again, it'll be interesting. I don't know if this is going to be more on the friendship and how they help each other to cope, or if there is an element of romance, but I know that the movie is highly applauded. I think it came out in like the 70s. So this is going to be probably a little bit harder to find. I think I've seen it on Amazon, so I'm going to be trying to get it there and get my thoughts on it, because like I said, it's a book that was discussed when I was little, and the movie as well, and so I kind of want to fulfill the curiosity of my childhood and know what this was about. Moving on to book number 16, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I do own this one on my Kindle. I watched the series, the first season of this series when it first came out, and I loved it. I loved the storyline. And then once the season ended, I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch any more of the series until I read it, because I felt like the books are going to give me so much more backstory to what's going on with the world. But basically, you have a girl who finds out she's descended from witches, and she comes in contact with this book that different like vampires have been trying to find, and witches have been trying to find, and it's been hidden, and she comes in contact to it, and the knowledge is absorbed into her, and so people kind of want her, whether to use her, destroy her, that kind of element. And she meets a vampire, and he at first wants the knowledge from her, is kind of intrigued by her, and that kind of turns into a romance. And I think going into the second season, or maybe the second book, there might be some time travel involved. So it just seemed really good, kind of fantasy, supernatural, adventure, time travel. I mean, a little bit of something for everybody. So I want to kind of finish this series before I go back to the television series and watch it. So I'll be doing that. Book number 17 is another classic. This is one that you see often on the 100 books to read that are like the best of all time, or the 100 books to read before you die. And that is The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. This was also made into a movie, I think back in the 90s. And it's basically about 4 generations of Chinese women in San Francisco. And so there's going to be a lot of heartbreak. There's going to be a lot of growth. There's going to be a lot of family wisdom that's being passed around between the women. So I really want to read that. I've heard that's a wonderful, wonderful, empowering kind of story, even though it, does bring a lot of hardships to light. So I will be reading that, and then hopefully trying to watch the movie. As keeping in tone with feminine wisdom and the sharing of it between women, book number 18 is The Red Tent by Anita, I think it's Diamant. This is one that I have on the Kindle. It was also made into a TV adaptation, either late 90s, early 2000s, I'm not sure. But basically this is, her name is Dinah. In the Bible, her life is only hinted at in a brief and violent detour, with more familiar chapters of the book of Genesis that are about her father Jacob and his dozen sons. Told in Dinah's voice, this novel reveals the traditions and turmoils of ancient womanhood, the world of the Red Tent. It begins with the story of her mothers, Leah, Rachel, Zilpah, Bilhah, the 4 wives of Jacob. They love Dinah and give her gifts that sustain her through a hard-working youth, a calling of midwifery, and a new home in a foreign land. So I think it's really interesting when you get into the stories of the Bible and the women in the Bible. And I feel that with my part of my ancestry being of Hebrew origins, it's kind of like a calling to me to read books about Hebrew ancestry and about the women of the Bible, because I do feel like they were very strong to have to deal with a lot of things that they had to go through. Times were very different, and you don't really hear a lot about the women. I feel like their stories are starting to come out now. So I really want to read this one, and it just always intrigued me from when it came out. And so I'll be reading that one. Book number 19 is another, I feel like we have a trend here. This is another one that deals with within the realm of psychology, but I know that this has been an award-winning film or adaptation, and that is Sybil by Flora Rita Schreiber. And in the movie, I think Sybil is played by a very young Sally Fields. Many of us remember her as the mom in Mrs. Doubtfire, or as the voice of the cat in the Homeward Bound movies, which are fantastic and I love them. But Sybil is basically a girl who has 16 different personalities, and they're not all female. She has some male personalities too. So I know that, I think Sally Field was nominated for some sort of award for her role, because she brings to life 16 different personalities. So I do want to read it. The next book is a book that is, once again, one of my mother's most favorite books that she remembered reading, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. And that's probably because my mom grew up in Brooklyn. My families are from Brooklyn, and I still have family there. And so it's kind of interesting to read about a book that literally can say the streets that my family's grew up around or visited or went to, or the different areas. So A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is about a young girl called Francie Nolan, and she needed to be made of stern stuff for growing up in the Williamsburg slums of Brooklyn. New York demanded fortitude, precocity, and a strength of spirit. She's often scorned by neighbors for her family's erratic and eccentric behavior, such as her father Johnny's taste for alcohol and Aunt Sissy's habit of marrying serially without the formality of divorce. No one, least of all Francie, could say that the Nolans' life lacked drama. By turns overwhelming, heartbreaking, and uplifting, the Nolans' daily experiences are raw with honestly and tenderly threaded with family connectedness. So, like I said, I really want to read this because it was one of my mom's more favorite books. It's one that I remember her talking about a lot. I think Francie's an avid reader too. It's kind of her way of escaping the family. I'm not sure on that, but it's supposed to be a really beautifully written story of this girl growing up with this kind of crazy family in the slums of Brooklyn. And so I want to read it. Next is going to be another kind of family legacy story, and I actually had this on my list before I found out it was made into a movie, but it was recently released into a movie, and that is Pachinko by Lee Min-jin. I found this story fascinating because I started getting into a lot of Korean dramas and K-pop, oh gosh, probably about like 10, 11 years ago, and I started watching a lot of the K-dramas, and I found out you don't really know a lot of the history of Korea, and it's not really, as well known as some of other countries' histories. I know that this one has also been making a splash among the YouTube boards or the booktube boards, and Book Talk as being, a really acclaimed book, and a lot of people are liking it. So, but because it's still just starting to be talked about, I will talk about it here. And that's basically in the early 1900s, teenage Sunja, the adored daughter of a crippled fisherman, falls for a wealthy stranger at the seashore near her home in Korea. He promises her the world, but when she discovers she's pregnant and that her lover is married, she refuses to be bought. Instead, she accepts an offer of marriage from a gentle, sickly minister passing through on his way to Japan. But her decision to abandon her home and reject her son's powerful father sets off a dramatic saga that will echo down through the generations. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm expecting lots of drama, possibly some tears, and I can't wait to watch the movie because I know that it stars Lee Min-ho, and the first K-drama I ever watched was Boys Over Flowers, which starred Lee Min-ho. So it'll be really interesting to see how his acting has progressed from when he was really young in Boys Over Flowers to being in Pachinko. Next, we have one of the greatest classics of all time that hopefully maybe I will fit into October, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I don't feel like I really need to explain that one because it is a well-renowned book all over the world. Many film adaptations. I might choose a few when I compare and contrast. After that, I am, like many, a Gilmore Girls fan. I never watched the series when I was younger because I felt like I was kind of living it. My mom was very young compared to a lot of my friends' moms. So it was just like, yeah, that's what I do every day. I don't see anything. But as I got older, I started watching Gilmore Girls and I kind of fell in love with it. And there are a lot of things that remind me, both the funny moments and some of the harder moments, about what it was like for having a younger mom and growing up kind of as, more of a best friend situations than mother and daughter situations at times. So I wanted to read Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham, who plays the mom in the Gilmore Girls. She is Lorelai Gilmore, and I adore her. I love her. She is probably my favorite character out of the whole series. So I want to do that, and some people have said to get the audiobook because she actually narrates it herself. So it's just about her talking about her life as an actress and then talking about her life on the set of Gilmore Girls and how that kind of influenced her in her life. After that, I want to read Gods and Monsters by Janie Marie. And this was one that just seemed really interesting because it just wasn't a plot line that I had really heard about before. And it's Jane appears to be nothing special. In fact, she's a sad sight to behold. Afflicted by the sorrow of her tragic past and a failing marriage, the young mother of two is terrified as every other soul is as terrified as every other soul when humanity faces doom. Yet when hope seems lost, Jane does something even her estranged husband fails to. She fights, and she's not alone. David and his companions are what our world has dismissed as mere legend. Their duty to the human race brings them across the country, and they all know it's no coincidence when they cross paths with Jane. As it happens, Jane is special. She's destined to rid the world of darkness. With monsters of every nightmare seeking her out, a noble immortal knight showing her what love truly feels like, and even more powerful beings wagering the fate of her soul, Jane will embark on an epic journey to save her family and the world. And I just kind of was fascinated because you don't really hear of a single divorced mother being the heroine to save the world, as well as like having this great love story unfold. So based on that alone, I was like, yes, please. Yes, please. And the covers are beautiful. I hope to buy those and share those covers with you because they are just stunning. Next is another classic, and that is Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. This is one that I'm not really into a lot of like horrors and mysteries and things like that, unless it's like more supernatural, like vampires and werewolves and mummies and things like that. But this one I know is one of the more talked about ones. There's show adaptations. I know there's a new prequel adaptation coming out. So I wanted once again to knock this off the list and see what all the fuss was about. And it's basically they were a perfect and beautiful family until a heartbreaking tragedy shattered their happiness. Now, for the sake of inheritance that will ensure their future, the children must be hidden away out of sight as if they never existed. They are kept in the attic of their grandmother's labyrinth mansion, isolated and alone. As the visits from their seemingly unconcerned mother slowly dwindle, the four children grow ever closer and depend on one another to survive both this cramped world and their cruel grandmother. So it's a suspenseful tale of family greed and murder and forbidden love. So be really interesting to see that. Next is Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg. I am a huge fan of Fried Green Tomatoes, the movie with Tawanda, and just the story is just such a wonderful story in the movie that I want to try to basically read the book and see how similar they are. But basically it is about two women, Evelyn, who's in a sad slump of middle age, and gray-headed Miss Threadgood, who's telling her life story. And her tale includes two more women, the impressively daredevil tomboy Iggy and her friend Ruth, who back in the 30s ran a little place in Whistle Stop, Alabama, offering good coffee, southern barbecue, and all kinds of love and laughter, even the occasional murder. And as the past unfolds, the present will never be quite the same again. And if you remember in the movie, it's Iggy and Ruthie's story that's being told to Evelyn, and it kind of causes this like awakening in Evelyn, and she goes from being kind of meek and mild to being very empowered, and she just does some hilarious things. So I can't wait to read the book. Another book that was turned into a movie that I watched when I was younger and I loved was Circle of Friends by Maeve Binchy. And it begins with Benny Hogan and Eve Malone growing up inseparable in the village of Knock Glen. Benny is the only child yearning to break free from her adoring parents. Eve, the orphaned offspring of a convent handyman and a rebellious blue blood abandoned by her mother's wealthy family to be raised by nuns. Eve and Benny, they knew the sins and secrets behind every villager's lace curtains except their own. It widened at Dublin at the university where Benny and Eve met beautiful Nan Milan and Jack Foley, a doctor's handsome son. But heartbreak and betrayal would bring the worlds of Knockglen and Dublin into explosive collision. Long hidden lies would emerge to test the meaning of love and the strength and ties within the fragile gold bands of a circle of friends. So I remember in the movie, there are, Benny is kind of the one that you're seeing the story through, and she's very sweet and very good, and she falls for a boy, and there's a lot of betrayal that happens to kind of break them apart, and she's just very heartbroken, but she's the heroine that you're following, and it really is, just like it said, it's about, you know, the test of friendship when betrayal happens, and can you come back from it, and can love come back from it. And loved the movie. It had Chris O'Donnell, and a very young Chris O'Donnell, and he was cute and everything, and I might have had a little crush on him at the time. Didn't help that he was also in the Three Musketeers, so, you know. Next is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I know that's also making the rounds because of the series that came out on Amazon. I watched the first season, loved it, loved the world. I want more. I need more. So I'm going to read the series. So we're going to start off with Wheel of Time, and hopefully I can read that before the second series, maybe get another book out, because I know that these can be quite thick and time demanding. Next is another classic that was also made into a movie, like I said, themes here, and that is Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, and that's basically about, it's kind of like her own story about when she goes to a divorce, and she kind of goes around and travels the world and kind of finds herself, and also finds love again. It was made into a movie, I think in the early 2000s, and I think it was Julia Roberts that's in it, but I never watched it because I knew I wanted to read the book, so gotta read the book to watch the movie. So we'll be doing that. Next is, we are at book 30, so we're making headway. Book 30 is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This is obviously one that everybody says to read. It's on everybody's, you know, must-read list. It's been made into a movie. I also know that a biography about the author came out recently, and I want to kind of read that before I read The Little Prince, because it talks about how the people he met became characters in the book. So I do want to read that and then watch the movie, and I hear it's beautiful, I hear it's cute, I hear it's tear-jerking, so we'll see which one I fall in, if not all three. Book number 31 is another one that was made into an epic movie that won awards, that is talked about. There's a little bit of controversy going on with it because of the subject matter, and that is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. It's the story of a young Southern debutante that's basically growing up around the time of the Civil War. So there are issues of slavery, there are issues of racism that are addressed in there. From my understanding in watching the movies, it's the story of Scarlett, how she goes through her life, how she becomes a woman, how she learns about the world, and she grows as a person into understanding all the different things that are going on, what people are fighting for, and what she is willing to fight for. So I do want to read this and watch the movie again and just really take an in-depth look at it, because I know it's an epic one. Another epic one that got made into a series again is the Pillars of the Earth series by Ken Follett, and this is about the prior of Kingsbridge who wants to build this big Gothic cathedral, and this is going on when there's a lot of turmoil and a lot of civil war going on in England, and it kind of covers like a few generations. I don't think it's a lot, but it does cover a few generations. I watched the movie series many years ago, and it's got like an all-star cast, and it covers, I think, I want to say the 12 to 1300s in England. I'm not sure on it, but it's a very early period in English history. And I am a huge Middle Ages, medieval England history buff. That's what I actually went to school for. And so I do want to read the series, rewatch it, and go from there. Next is another fan favorite, and that is The Family Corleone by Mario Puzo. This story is the basis for what becomes the Godfather series, and the Godfather series is a fantastic, film franchise. So it's basically about the Corleone family and their rise to mafia power, and just the basis for the movie. So I'm not going to go into it more than that because it's the Godfather. It's the Godfather. Next is another favorite, and all I can say is Warriors, come out and play. And now I feel like an idiot for doing that. But yes, I want to read The Warriors by Sol Uric. It's once again a great classic cult movie about the Warriors, who are one of the many gangs in New York during, I think, the 70s. And they get framed by another gang for the death of kind of like the head king of all gangs at a rally. And now they have to survive and get back to their base of operations in Brooklyn. The Warriors are from Brooklyn. So we've already talked about Brooklyn. We know how I feel about Brooklyn. But it was introduced to me by my husband, and it is just a cult classic, and it's a great movie. And there's all these fun, different, gangs at the time. Now I'm not advocating for that, but it's interesting just because you have all female gangs. You have the Furies, which they dress in baseball outfits and they paint their faces, and it's just very, very interesting at that time, and just kind of what goes on, and will they survive the night. So I want to read the book that the movie was based off of and go from there and compare, and have fun and see why it's so great that every other movie tends to call out that key phrase that I just did and feel like an idiot for doing. Book 35 is another classic that I won't get into too much because I feel like it's very well known. I haven't read it. I've wanted to read this since I was about 15, and that is Roots by Alex Haley. And for those of you who don't know a lot about it, it is a huge, it's a thick, chunky tome book, all about kind of the history of America from slavery. And it's a wonderful, well, I don't know if I want to say wonderful, but it's this beautiful story about a young man who's taken from Africa, and his name is Kunta Kinte, and he is brought to America through the slave trade, and he becomes a slave, and how he tries to kind of fight it. And there's a wonderful scene in the film where the slave master is trying to give him a new name, and he was like, I have my name, and it's just this kind of beautiful, heartbreaking moment of him just trying to be him. And I think it goes down to the descendants of him, maybe through the Civil War. I'm not sure, but I know it's possibly a generational story of Black lives in early America, and a lot of the struggles that they had to face from slavery, emancipation, freedom, and even after freedom, things that they were facing. It's from what the small clips that I've seen when I was younger, a very beautiful story. I didn't know it got remade. I will probably be watching both of them when I do compare the book to the film. But I remember seeing the one that had LeVar Burton as Kunta Kinte, and I love LeVar Burton. I was a fan of his Reading Rainbow show growing up as a kid. I also loved him in Star Trek. He was probably the only reason I watched it as a kid, because I loved him, and I still love him. He's an amazing person. And so I really want to read this story because I feel like it's one that we should read. It should be read, it should be told, and I expect it to be very moving. I expect it to be very eye-opening. I expect it to be heartbreaking. I expect a box of tissues, but I expect it to be one of those books that you feel touches a part of your soul, and it just doesn't let go. So I really want to read it and rewatch the films. So I do will be doing that. Book 36 is going to be another one that got made into an award nominated or winning movie, I think, and that is Sophie's Choice by William Styron. And basically, Sophie's Choice is about three characters. There's Stingo, who's a sexually frustrated, aspiring novelist. Nathan, his charismatic but violent Jewish neighbor. And Sophie, an Auschwitz survivor who is Nathan's lover. Their entanglement in one another's lives will build a stirring revelation into agonizing secrets that will change them forever. Very, it's one of those ones. I feel like maybe a lot of the reasons why these books are on this list is either they are ones that are going to make me cry, or they're very chunky books. I feel like that's where we're going with a lot of these books on this list. But these are also books that, I do want to read because there's a reason why they're on these lists. There's a reason why they affect people so much and stay with you. Book number 37 is another classic that was made into a wonderful series that I'm sure every child loves, and that is The Never Ending Story by Michael Ende. This is this story where a young boy finds a book, and as he reads the books, the world of the book unfolds, and he realizes that he has the power to save this world. And I actually love the story. I used to have a Siamese cat years ago that was called Atreyu after the characters in the book. So I want to read the story, see if it's at all like the book, because I've done that with The Princess Bride and was very much surprised by the end results of that. So I want to see if it's the same for The Never Ending Story or if the book is just drastically different. So book 38 is going to be Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. This is once again made into a movie, had Tom Hanks, and it was very, very interesting. It also had Halle Berry, and it's kind of their story through multi-lives, incarnations, and all from like primitive time to futuristic times, and it's all kind of tied together. The movie was beautifully done. Like, it was just artistically, visually stunning. So I've heard a lot of things about the book, so I want to see how the book lives up to the movie and which was better. Book 39 is another classic, and that is The Once and Future King by T.H. White. That is about King Arthur. I feel like this is one of the most quintessential books on King Arthur that's referenced a lot. And I love the stories of King Arthur. I love comparing them and trying to find like the history of it all in that myth and in that legend. And so I want to kind of see T.H. White as he pretty much wrote what is the basis for a lot of stories that came after. The last book on our list is a recommendation from my husband, and that is Many Lifetimes by Joan Grant. And basically the story the synopsis kind of tells the all. And it talks about, have we lived before? Are our talents and skills attributes we have worked hard to develop in earlier experiences on Earth? Are some of our current problems the result of unresolved conflicts from past lives? According to Many Lifetimes, the answer to the questions is yes. Writing in alternating chapters, Joan Grant and Dennis Kelsey approach the topic of reincarnation from different angles. Miss Grant as an intuitive who clearly remembers past lives, and husband Dennis Kelsey as a psychologist who has explored the secrets of earlier lives through hypnosis. So there is this theory that, if you do, I'm not speaking for everybody, but there are people who believe in reincarnation and different lifetimes. And there's ongoing studies to try to find out any truths to this. And there are a lot of psychiatrists and therapists who are working with hypnosis to see what happens. And this is one of the stories. Joan Grant is one of the people at the forefront that this kind of happened to, because I think this is like 60s and 70s when this happened. And she has a series of books, this one being kind of like a broadening over all the other ones, about the different lifetimes that she has lived, that she recalls under hypnosis, that she sees, she can put into detail. And some people, they even try to match it up with like history books to see, what's going on. Is she lying? Is she telling the truth? So it is one that I do want to read because the subject matter interests me greatly. And it's also one of my husband's, it's on my husband's bookshelf, and he wants to read it too, so, you know, well, it's a couples activity. But no, I do think it's going to be a very interesting read and topic matter, that it's the fact that it's also involving a psychological aspect of it, while the hypnosis, there's going to be some interesting science behind everything. So I'm curious to feel about that. But yeah, that is basically the 40 before 40. And thank you for sticking with me throughout this. I know this was another long video. I appreciate you guys. If you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts. If you loved them and yes, I should be reading them, or if they were a big no and I like should avoid them at all costs, please let me know, because you know, there's other books that I would like to put on there and maybe switch out and everything. But these ones are pretty solid, I think, except for like maybe one or two. But I do want to read these by around this time next year. I should hopefully have them all done. We will see how many I get done, because like I said, a lot of them are chunky. We will see how many of them bring me to tears, because I'm pretty sure as it stands, at least 90% of them are gonna, you know, make me go through a box of tissues. But, you know, if you want to buddy read them, reach out, let me know. You know, it's always good to have a buddy to read some of these chunkier or, you know, series books with. If you have other books you think should be on the list, let me know, because my T.B.R. list is never ending, and I'm always looking for good books, especially some of the older ones that I might not have heard about that came out when I was younger. So once again, if you like this video, press the like button, hit subscribe, and continue the journey with me. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.